Hey guys, so today I thought I would just walk through some basics in the key of C and just some kind of licks that you can throw whenever you're playing a song in C. These aren't all of them, but they're just some cool ones that I've run across. So for the key of C, we have got the C chord, that's our 1 chord. And then our 2 chord is a D minor, 3 chord is an E minor, 4 chord is an F, 5 chord is a G, 6 chord is an A minor, and then we would have a B diminished as our 7th chord and back to a C. So we're going to primarily look at some cool things you can do with open chords on all of these, as there's a little trick that you can kind of do with all the major chord or all the chords, with the exception of we're not really going to look at the 7 chord, which would be a B diminished, but we'll still get the other ones. Okay, so for C, if we're doing our open C, which is your first finger on the first fret of the B string, your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, and then your ring finger is on the 3rd fret of the A string, and you're not playing that low E, here's some tricks you can do. Keeping that pinky free, you're gonna use that pinky you can play the 3rd fret of the E string and the 3rd fret of the B string. And the cool thing is, if you take that pinky up just one more to the G string on the 3rd fret, you've got a C7. So those are some cool tricks you can do. Try to practice that for a little bit because it's kind of cool, even if you're strumming, right? And the last thing you can do is you can also take your pointer finger off. Alright, so then we'll move on to the D chord. The 2nd chord is D minor. So an open D minor is you're going to play the D strings open. G string is going to be covered by your middle finger on the 2nd fret. Your ring finger is going to go on the 3rd fret of the B string. And then your pointer finger is going to go on the 1st fret of the high E. Now, cool thing you can do here, I'm actually going to show you 2 things you could do. You could just play your D minor, and what you can do is you can pull off the pointer finger from the 1st fret of the high E string, but you can also use your pinky on that 3rd fret of the high E string to get some pretty cool sound. But another cool thing that you can do is not play the D minor, but actually play a D7. Which is kind of cool because this is when we're using the 2nd chord in a chord progression. We're actually making it a 7th chord, a major 7th, or not a major 7th, sorry, it's a major chord but it's 7. I'm not a music theorist, but anyways, so what you can do here, instead of playing a D minor, you can play a D7, and then to add even a little bit more spice to it, we're going to get this note as well. So what you can do is you use your thumb to grab the 2nd fret of the low E. You're going to not play the A string, D string open. Middle finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the G. Pointer finger is going to go on the 1st fret of the B. And then your ring finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the high E. So it sounds really cool, especially if you're passing from like a F to what's our 4 chord, which is an F, to our G, but we'll get there. So that's some cool things you can do there with that one. Okay, E minor, pretty standard stuff you could do with the E minor. So we're not gonna spend too much time on the E minor because it's really just, pretty standard stuff that you could do. All E minor is, probably the easiest chord on guitar, is you're gonna use you can use middle or pointer, but all you need is the 2nd fret of the A and the 2nd fret of the D, and everything else is open. But you can do some of those same notes that we did earlier, because you're in the key of C, and those notes work. So the 3rd fret of the high E and the 3rd fret of the B with your pinky work just fine there. Also, there's some occasions where you can try and play it around with it, and you can actually do an E7 when you're playing in the key of E. excuse me, the key of C. Okay, so an E7 is just your middle finger's on the 2nd fret of the E, of the A string, and your pointer finger's on the 1st fret of the G, and everything else is open. So you gotta kind of listen for that, right? So like if you're listening to like Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out, it's got that going. But you're kind of mixing major and minor there, so you just kind of have to listen to when it sounds good. Okay, so then we would have our F chord. Now what I want to show you on this one, it's not so much the embellishments that you can do, because the way I'm going to play this F chord is I'm going to use my thumb and wrap around and get that 1st fret of the low E. Then I'm going to use my pointer finger to bar the B and high E on the 1st fret. My middle finger is going to that 2nd fret of the G, and then my ring finger is going to that 3rd fret of the D. What I like to do here is not so much the embellishments, although you could, right, with the pinky on the 3rd fret of the high E and the 3rd fret of the B, just like you did with that C chord. But I like to throw in a minor 4th sometimes because it sounds really cool. And all you have to do for this, it's a bit of a stretch. You just have to take your middle finger off and then use your pointer finger to now bar the to bar the G string as well on the 1st fret. And now you got an F minor. So it sounds really cool, especially if you're like ending a song. Back to your C. Alright, now we're going to go to our G chord. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with the G chord. One of my favorites is always to do this. I think it sounds so cool, especially on acoustic guitar. And that would be, use your ring finger and you plant it on the 3rd fret of the low E. Your pinky's going to be planted on the 3rd fret of the high E. Now frees up these other 2 fingers to do this. So what you're going to do is you're going to hammer on, using your middle finger, hammering on to the, sorry I didn't mean to flip anybody off there, but hammer it on to the 2nd fret of the D string, and your pointer finger is going to hammer on to the 1st fret of the B string. And anytime you can play that, I think it sounds great on acoustic. It also sets you up pretty nicely for this cool little slide you can do in the key of C. You hear it in like Eric Clapton's Bell Bottom Blues. And what that is you're gonna you're gonna use your thumb and your middle finger. Your thumb's gonna pluck the D string and the B string open. Then you're gonna play those 2 open. Then, and you're thinking of that G, right? You got this. You can play it with the G chord if you wanted to. So you're gonna do open on the D and the B. Then you're gonna hammer on to the 2nd fret of the D with your middle finger, 1st fret of the B with your pointer finger. You're going to slide down to where you're playing the 3rd fret of the D and 3rd fret of the B, and then the 5th fret of the D and 5th fret of the B. So that's just a cool little, which is again in Bell Bottom Blues from Eric Clapton, but you can hear in other songs as well. That kind of sets you up to do something cool like that. Alright, that leaves us with our last one, which is the A minor. Now, of course, there's some things you can do here with the A minor that sound pretty cool, just like hammer-ons and pull-offs and stuff like that. But what you can do, an A minor is simply just your pointer finger is on the 1st fret of the B string, your middle finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the D string, and then your ring finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the G string. So of course you can pull off and hammer on with your 1st finger. Alright, but you can do that. You can also use your pinky to get that stretched out to the 3rd fret of the E string. But the coolest thing I think you can do in the key of C with an A minor chord is actually kind of a walk down with the bass notes. So you ever heard the Beatles song, Why My Guitar Gently Weeps? There it is. they're using that, right? So you got your A minor. This is really the toughest part of this one, I think. You're gonna stretch your pinky finger out to grab the 3rd fret of the low E. And then you because you're doing this kind of walk down, you've got several options. You can get down to your F, but you need a passing chord. So let me teach that to you real quick. Okay, so this would be like it's kind of like an F sharp minor something-ish, but I don't know. But a little quick passing chord to go into your F is your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the low E, your ring finger on the 2nd fret of the D, and your pinky on the 2nd fret of the G, and then your pointer finger goes on that 1st fret of the B string. That's a really cool. Now you could just go straight to the F. You don't even need that passing chord. But you've got it there in your arsenal if you need it. So I hope this helps. Just some ideas in the key of C. Let me know in the comments below what you think.